welcome back to League of Legends DFS Esports Breakdown. It is January 13th, the first slate of the new year. Pretty excited about this one. Of course, a couple of things to get out the way. I'm still working my way back from tonsillectomy, nose surgery, 3-in-1 surgery I had, so I'm going to be a little bit somber in this one, but things are getting better. It's just, still working my way back to full strength. So bear with me. Probably going to take some pauses for water and stuff, but nonetheless, we should power through this pretty easily. I'm pretty excited for this year. I think this LPL year is shaping up to be pretty exciting. I think we have a lot of open games or a lot of open area. I don't think there's as many dominant teams as we had before. I think we maybe have like 1, 2, or 3 maybe teams that look to be kind of a cut above the rest. So I think all in all, this is going to be a pretty exciting year. I think we have a wide open league. I think we have that in the LCK as well. So I think this is going to be a pretty exciting year. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So forgive me as I pull up the odds. I forgot to do so. There we go. So first glance at the odds, we have FPX WE as a pick'em. We have AL a slight favorite over IG, and we have JDG as a -360 over BLG. So pretty a decent first slate to get started with. We have a couple close games. We have one relatively one-sided game, but odds be damned. I think that game could actually be pretty close as well. So we'll go, I guess, in order of them starting. We have FPXWE up first. We can see the rosters here. We have Xiao Hu in the top lane for FPX. Here, I'll pull up the stuff here so we can look at where these players are coming from. Hao Yi in jungle, Care, LWX, of course, returning, and then Lele in support. If we take a look at the roster and where these new FPX faces are coming from, we could see they're all coming up from the FPX Blaze team, so that's pretty nice to have a little bit of cohesion starting with. We could see Xiaolahu Hao Yi, I believe is how it's pronounced. But we could see age 20, age 19, age 22, a little bit older for a rookie player, but whatever. Coming up from FPX Blaze from last year, so all three coming up through the academy together. That's a positive sign, I think. And then, of course, we know Care started coming into his own last year. LWX is a bit of a hit-and-miss player, but we know he's acceptable in his position and in his role here. And then on the WE side, we have Biu Heng. Gonna be weird to say Heng after saying Hung all the time last year. But then we have Shanks, Hope, and Iwandi. So at name value, you may be a little bit surprised to see the odds kind of be so similar. Of course, we have Hope coming over from JD Gaming. Of course, he looked like an incredible player there on that team last year. Top 4, I want to say they made World Semifinals last year. Hope did with JD Gaming. So seeing him up against this kind of half academy team from the FPX side, and then of course we know Iwandi coming over from LNG. We know Biu and Shanks were both over on this WE team last year that did not win a game, I believe. Tournament results, we could see LPL Summer 0-16 Biu Shanks. So they're still returning those players. Again, I don't think those two players are necessarily the big problems, although I don't think they didn't help their case. Specifically Shanks, I think Shanks is someone who's a little bit overrated, but I don't think people rate him very highly anyway, so it's kind of a mute point anyway. But this one's interesting because I feel like if you kind of just look at the names to start with, you're probably going to be a little bit confused. I'd imagine WE are like this. Oh, actually, FPX are kind of like the slight favorite on DK. Although it is pretty close. It looks like, FPX are kind of slightly up above there. Care is actually like more expensive than harder even. So that's kind of a little bit weird. I'd imagine FPX maybe are a team a little bit forgotten about on this slate. And for that reason, I think I'm actually going to like them a little bit. I'm going to side with FPX over Team WE in this one to start the year. First game out. I just think people maybe will get a little bit enamored with the Team WE names. Like when we look at Hope coming over from JD Gaming, people are going to assume he kind of keeps that very, very strong form. I think he was a little bit a product of the team around him. I think when you look, of course, at that JDG roster from last year, it's hard not to look like a very good AD carry when you have pretty much stars in every other position, maybe outside of mid lane. But of course, I just kind of early on, I'm going to value, I think, this cohesion a little bit with this FPX team. Of course, Care and LWX played together. Xiao Lao Hu and Hei Hao Yi. That's a weird one to get out, but and Lele, of course, coming up from the academy together. I value that cohesion that they'll have as well. I think FPX will be able to win this series, maybe 2-1, maybe 2-0, but I'm leaning towards FPX here. I think they're maybe going to be a tad bit under-owned. When we look at their pricing and compare it to JD Gaming, it's $200 more from Care to go to Knight. It's $200 more to go from LWX to Ruler. Hao Yi is 400 up to Knavi. Going up from Xiao Lao Hu up to JD Gaming or to 369, that is 600. So it does get a little bit pricey in some areas, but for mid 80 carry and support, it's only a little bit more to get up to that JD Gaming mark. So I think most people were going to try to click on those JDG names as opposed to the FPX ones. And I think this is a decent spot for FPX to go ahead and get this one started. Of course, we don't have any numbers to go off of. I like to keep a clean slate for numbers. I very rarely see that the numbers from like one year to another translate outside of a few cases. So for probably the first week or two, I'm not going to be bringing up like combined kills per minute or anything like that. We're probably going to be talking about that a little bit later. And of course, that's just another thing for my voice to get tangled up on as well. The second series here we have is AL, my boys, against IG. Again, AL coming in as a slight minus 135 favorite. Of course, we kind of already know where this one's going, but we'll talk about it anyway. Over on the IG side, we have YSKM. We have Gideon coming over from, I want to say Fredit Brion, or one of those lower LCK teams. I want to say Fredit Brion, though. Maybe Hanwha. I think it was Hanwha. I don't know. We'll see in a second. But and then we have Nenny, I believe, role swapping from a top to mid. And then we have On and Wink. So it's a pretty interesting one. I believe, let's check Nenny. Yeah, he played top. So we have the role swap there from top to mid from Nenny. And of course we have YKSM and then Gideon, or YS at KM. He was with the IG youth team, spent a little bit of time with Frank Esports. I believe, that's just a PCS team. So not a lot we know about him other than spent some time over in the PCS. Actually had some like okay-ish results, but I didn't watch these games personally, so I can't really comment on how much of a decent player he is. But I think talent-wise, I think the PCS is not terrible. So I think we can kind of value him as a probably like just a lower-end top laner until we see a little bit from him. Gideon, of course, he came over from KT Rolster. That was the team, and of course he got some okay games in there for KT. Not a good player, not a great player. We didn't see a lot from Gideon last year. I think this culmination of IG players is just kind of odd. I think especially at the bottom lane again, they're having Wink role swap again. I believe he was a support, and then he went back up to AD carry, and then now he's back to support. He's just kind of across the board. I just don't love the consistency there. And then, of course, the role swap from Nenny from top to mid. It just kind of seems like they're all across the board. The odds on this one just seem a little bit odd in my opinion. I know I'm somebody who overrates anyone's legend anyway. I don't disagree with that sentiment at all. I have an affinity for this AL team. I'm not going to deny that. I think this is actually a pretty good year for them, as kind of depicted in my season-long best ball drafts. I think AL is actually pretty underrated coming into this year, and I think it's actually kind of with good reason. I think they're reuniting Betty and Sword Art. Of course, Sword Art is somebody I rate pretty highly. I know he floundered out in NA, with TSM, and of course he came back, spent some time with Weibo. Didn't look good during that time, but we know Betty and Sword Art have played together, and they've actually looked at like a pretty strong bottom lane. And I think obviously we know Betty and Xiaohao are pretty strong individual players. They just need to be a little bit unleashed. I think if Sword Art is able to recapture some of his form from a few years ago, I think when we look back to like 2019 when he was on Weibo and or sorry, maybe Sunning, um, let's see, yeah, Sunning 2019 when he took this team to the final. Um, yeah, so it would have been. I'm trying to remember what year. I think it was. Yeah, I think it was this 2019 team, but I could be wrong. Um, but he took a team. He took this team to the final, and of the World Championships. And I think of course, he got that big payday. Went to NA. We know the story there. But I think if Sordar can reclaim that that LPL magic that he had, I think he can make a very big difference in this AL team that needs a little bit of direction. And I think they are individually very skilled. That's why we see them pull out so many of these unlikely team fights, which is why I love them so much, is because they're willing to take these fights, and they're a lot better at these fights than the other teams are. I think maybe if they have Sword Art to help dictate them and get them in a better spot before the fights happen, then I think we could see them actually be like a relatively decent team. Um, I just think the gap in these teams is a decent bit, wide here, and I'm surprised to see it so close. So overall, of course, AL, it goes a little bit unsaid when you're clicking on one of my videos, but I think AL is legitimately underrated and undervalued at the start of this year. We'll see how their odds progress, but I think this is actually like relatively one-sided. I'm gonna go with AL 2-0. They're a team I'm obviously going to want to get a mix of, as well as FPX. I know this isn't going to be too fancy, going with double favorites to start. It's going to be a little bit tough to build with. I wouldn't avoid double jungle for sure, but nonetheless, I think it's a pretty interesting spot. I'm not going to be testing the waters with IG. I think you can definitely make a case that this FPX WE game can go either way. I wouldn't argue with that, with you with that, but I think this AL IG game is actually kind of one-sided, and I'm going to go with the AL side here. BLG JD Gaming. This is actually the one that I'm going to need to spend the most time on, so bear with me as I take a second, take a drink, kind of reset before this one. All right. So of course we have JD Gaming, who's widely considered that number one team in the LPL. We have BLG, who seems to be a pretty popular kind of underdog or dark horse pick to do well in the league. I agree with it. I do like the shape up of this BLG team a good bit. I think they have some serious threats. I think now that Shun has a team around him, it's pretty exciting as well. When we do look over at the odds, we see JD Gaming minus 360. It's a pretty interesting one for sure. I think this one is pretty close. I kind of disagree with these odds, but again, this is one where we are really going to not have enough info, with it being the first game for these teams. I think BLG maybe a little bit under owned on the slate. I think that's for that reason I'm willing to take the shot there. I do think JD Gaming are very likely to get the win. Of course, they're the big favorite of the slate. They're going to be the team people pair up with, kind of across the board. I think construction wise, if you go with like ALFPX, which I think is like a pretty likely build that I'll land on, um, to just leave off that JDG chalk, I think that's an interesting way to look at the slate. Um, I'd imagine AL are going to continue to be relatively over-owned. I think the sentiment of their action-packed games is a little bit overblown, even by my standards. But back to this one. Again, this one is very tough to break down. Again, we know JD Gaming is going to be at the top of everyone's power rankings. We look at these players. We know how insane 369 and Kanavi were. They get the upgrade in mid lane going from Yagao to Knight. They keep missing there as well, and they transition over from Hope to Ruler. And I think that is definitely like a small upgrade, but I don't think it's going to be as big as maybe people are going to make it out to be. And then over on the BLG side, of course, they're putting this ragtag group together. It's a revenge game from Yagao. Elk and On teaming up in the bottom lane. I believe, isn't that bottom lane from... Didn't they play together? Am I tripping? Weibo? No, Ultra Prime. I thought they played together at WE, but I must be crazy. But Elk and On... maybe it's because Elk played at in Weibo before. One second, I gotta get this out of my head, or else it's gonna bother me. Oh no, he was Jumeng. I was thinking Elk was Huanfeng. I'm tripping. Whatever. But I think this is actually a decent bottom lane, a competitive bottom lane for sure. Then of course, we know Bin has the potential. We know Yigao has the potential. We know Shun has these high highs and low lows and stuff. So I think this is actually going to be a pretty solid game. I think this is going to be pretty close, but I think it's going to be a close one where JDG take it, maybe 2-0, maybe 2-1. I don't know. This one is tough. It very is. This is a very tough one. I felt relatively confident in those first two. I like AL a good bit over IG. I like the spot for FPX. I don't necessarily think FPX win them a ton of the time. I'm not saying FPX should be bigger favorites. I just like the spot for FPX a lot. For this one, it gets a little bit mixy. I'm personally probably going to just take this BLG shot at the start of the year. Maybe JDG have some growing pains. Maybe the names are a little bit overrated. I know it's going to be relatively popular in terms of at least the DFS area. I know I see a good bit of people love BLG. I think there's a good reason for that. I just think overall, I just think JD, just given the slate, JDG being the sole kind of big favorite, kind of lends itself to them being the team that you build around, and then everywhere else that gets filled out. I just think if you want to mix it up, go with this BLG side, which I think is going to be a close game. I kind of just slightly disagree with these odds. I think this game is just going to be closer than the odds indicate. I still think JDG win. If you want to take a little bit more of an approach that I was hinting at, or that I was alluding to earlier, and just kind of leave this series off, I think that could be interesting as well. I think if you just go AL FPX, I think that gives you a pretty unique build, and just leave off that big favorite chalk JDG without necessarily going too crazy and going against it. I do think there is logic that dictates if you're playing against JDG, you might as well just put BLG in your lineups because you're already going against them in one way. The only slight caveat there is BLG or JDG, I think, can still win this without necessarily being optimal. But it's not like they're priced insanely either. So there's a lot of ways you could definitely make a case for this. But for me, I'm just going to slightly lean towards taking the BLG side. I think odds are I'm going to be making 3 lineups. I'm probably going to have JDG in none of them. I'm probably going to have like 1, maybe 2 BLG lineups. So that's probably the direction I'm going. I'm going to take the BLG dog on day 1. and I don't necessarily love it. I just think this game is closer than the odds suggest. I wouldn't be shocked to see JDG just kind of take this one out either way. But like I said, just ownership wise, the way the slate breaks out, I don't love paying this kind of chalk price with JDG to start the year. So I'll take the shot there, but I'm mainly focused on these other two games. I like getting in a good amount of AL and FPX. Maybe kind of go a little bit lighter on this one. And like I said, the logic there is if you're going to kind of leave off JDG, you're going to maybe look a little bit more towards BLG anyway. So, yeah, that's the direction I'm going to start the year. In terms of bloodiness, again, we kind of don't know. I would say FPXWE is probably the bloodiest. I would say AG or ALIG is probably second bloody, and then I would say maybe BLG JDG is probably third bloody. Um, but I'm not sure. Maybe JDG continue their pace that they had. They still do have Konami and Missing, which could unleash them a good bit. I'm not sure, but actually, I don't know. This one's tough. I could definitely see a lot of these going kind of different ways. So predicting bloodiness is pretty open. I don't think there's a big gap necessarily between all of these. That's just kind of the way I feel about them. I just think given that WE is very bad, they could give up a good bit. It's kind of the same story there for IG, although I would say maybe ALIG is probably behind JDG, BLG. Maybe in hindsight, I think maybe this one could get a little bit more active, but nonetheless, I still love the AL side and their willingness to throw down, sometimes anyway. So I don't know. I'm kind of just rambling now, and and my voice is hurting already. So I'm probably going to go ahead and call it there. So quick wrap up. I do like the FPX side, but that's more of I do like the FPX to win. I like the cohesion and stuff that they have, but either way, I do like the way that they set up on the slate specifically. That makes a little bit more sense to me. I think AL should be bigger favorites. I do disagree with this price tag. I know people are going to call me the delusional AL guy. Feel free to do so, especially if they lose this game. It is what it is. But nonetheless, I think AL is like a decent cohesive team, and I just do not look at this IG roster with any sort of respect. And then BLG JDG. Of course, I think this one is just closer than the odds suggest. I do kind of in my heart feel like JDG still get the win, but logic dictates that if I think this is closer than the odds are, then maybe I should just take the shot on BLG, which is what I'm doing. So kind of the official picks there are FPX, AL, and BLG, although not confidently. Of course, we don't really have much to go off of. So that'll be it for me tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. Tough to work through this one, but hopefully you guys appreciate it anyway. We'll see you guys all again tomorrow. Things go as planned. So thank you guys. See you then.